All right, good evening. My name is Eileen Hayes. I'm the coordinator for counseling for Sherman ISD, and I'm excited to see all of you. Thank you for coming tonight. We thought one thing that is happening across our country is we're just seeing more and more mental health struggles with teens and young adults, and it's in the newspaper. People know about it personally, but then also it's, there's always stories about it. And one thing we've seen is parents a lot of times are at a loss. Like, what do I do? What do I do? My child is struggling. I don't know what to do. What can I do at home? How do I get my child help? And so we thought, well, let's have a discussion about it. So we're really lucky in Sherman because we got all these experts who came, and really we're hoping that this will be kind of a launching off, and that we'll, as time goes on, we can have more of these evening programs to learn things. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and if you guys will just your name and your professional affiliation, where you work, and your interest in this topic.
I'm Tiffany Dancer. I'm the clinical director at Child and Family Guidance Center here locally. I have been a therapist, feels like forever, but I think it's been like 12 years. And so I actually started out being really interested in teenagers, and that was where I started my practice, and it's kind of grown from there to include children and adults.
I'm Harvey. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas, and I also am licensed as a supervisor to supervise counselors who are attempting to get their license. I am a senior director at Texoma Community Center. We are the local mental health authority for those of you who aren't familiar, and we'll be talking more about that tonight. But right now I oversee all of our children's mental health program and our crisis services. I have been a counselor now for about 12 years as well. And I started my career in crisis and spent the first 10 years doing crisis response. So a lot of my career has been on suicide prevention and recognizing violence risk and homicide prevention.
I'm Richard Heflin. I'm a mental health consultant with Region 10 Education Service Center. In the Service Center, we just help support the schools. I've been a counselor working with kids, primarily with serious emotionally or behaviorally disordered students for about 35 years. I am passionate about mental health of our students and our teachers also. So that's one thing that has kept me in this business. Probably more importantly than that is I'm a survivor of two kids, two teenagers. And my kids have gone on. My daughter blessed us with two grandkids even. So we're thriving with them now. But raising kids is tough, so I'm glad to be here tonight.
My name is Lorena Tidwell, former counselor here at Sherman ISD, now a bilingual school counselor in Oklahoma, and I'm just coming to share my school counseling aspect to the mental, emotional health crisis.
So we have some questions and a little structure that we're going to go through, just to kind of have an introduction of, what do you need to know? What are things you can do at home? How do you get help? And then we're going to open it up, and if people want to ask questions to the panel, they can do that. Okay. So our first question was, teens today have so many challenges and stressors. What do you think is important for parents to know about teens' mental health? You guys are just going to have to be brave. One of you jumps in.
I guess I'll start out is kids are going to struggle. And it was really tempting to me as a father I really wanted to prevent them from as much struggle and as much of that angst that I could. And I got a lot of some wisdom about halfway through my parenting time of just, Richard, relax. They are going to struggle, but it's during that struggling time that they learn that to build that character and they're building that internal stuff that's going to stay with them through adulthood. So don't be upset, don't be fearful of that struggle. They are going to struggle, but coming alongside them and struggling with them and allowing them to realize that they are not alone in that struggle, I think is going to be probably the most important thing. And you probably hear me saying things like that throughout the evening, just being there with them in that struggle, coming alongside them, gently and kind of benignly pressing into them during that struggling time. With the COVID situation and even before that, it's a really difficult time to be a kid. It's a difficult time to be a parent even. But just realizing that the struggle is going to be normal and helping them through that struggle is going to be important, and coming alongside them and walking through that struggle with them is going to be vital.
And I think sometimes kids are hesitant to share that struggle with parents because they're afraid that they're going to disappoint you or that they're going to be in trouble if they share it. And so I would encourage you to not put judgment around that. If they do come to you with something, even if it is something that drives you insane and you want to throttle them, don't. Because that is a chance to build trust with them. And if you are there for them and you listen to them and you receive them in a non-judgmental way, then they're more likely to come to you with the next thing that happens. Because like he said, struggles are constant at any age, but with teenagers especially, because they're trying to figure out who they are and they're growing and they're not an adult, but they're not a kid either. And it's a hard time. And so they don't always think you have the answer, but they don't know where else to go either. So you guys can be really solid for them just by being there and listening and not necessarily offering solutions to the problem, because sometimes that's not what they want. Sometimes they really do just want to be heard.
Parents, I think, Richard, what you said is normalizing this period of time in their lives. So as their psychological job of a child and a teenager is to develop their own identity. And the way that they're going to do that is they're going to join with their peers. They're going to try to find that peer group. Where do I fit? Who are my people that are like me, who will accept me? And in that process, a lot of times you find that they're going to be rejecting of authority or of leadership or of parents or schools. So I think it's really important to, as a parent, be watching who they're hanging out with, be watching that peer group, not letting them have unfettered access to social media. Know who their friends are. That's going to be the best way for you to kind of understand your child. And like Tiffany said, being really open and letting them know that they can always come to you and they're going to have a positive response.
Just like to share that, like they were saying, get to know their friends, and if you are uncomfortable dealing with some of the situations that they share with you, encourage them to find a mentor on their campus, whether it's a teacher, a counselor, another adult that they trust, so that they can vent and get some of those emotions off of their chest. Because, like they said, they really just want somebody to listen. We can't give them the answers. Sometimes they just have to work through them.
So what can parents do at home to support their child's emotional and mental well-being? And I'm kind of thinking, like, when you are, beginning to work with a family and the parent, and you're at the very beginning and there's a lot of struggles going on, like, what is some kind of concrete advice that you give parents?
Don't try to fix everything at once, because you're going to get overwhelmed, they're going to get overwhelmed, and it's going to send the message that they can't do anything right. So pick the things that are what I tell my people are, pick the 3 top things and let everything else go, because you have to start somewhere. You can get to the other stuff later, but right now what's important is building that relationship and building that trust, that they know that they can mess up and it's not going to be the end of the world. Because again, kids and teenagers, they don't live in the future, they live right now. What they're doing right now is what's super important. So for us, we may think oh, it's not a big deal, they'll get over it, it was just one slip. But for them, it's a huge deal because it was so important. So I would encourage parents to just take the time to let go of a lot of the things that aren't necessarily important and focus on the things that are.
I would encourage just to work on that relationship. And again, this is going to be that thing that I'm going to say probably with every question. It's about relationship. But very gently and almost benignly push into their world. Push into things that they are interested in. Build that relationship around their interests. The negative stuff we're going to have to take care of. But we're going to be able to take care of that negative stuff if we've got a really good, positive, foundational relationship to work from. Every time I hear the F word, I cringe. That word fix, that F word. So when I that concept of fixing kids, I think our time would be better spent sometimes if we focus on the positive things that they have going on in their lives and supporting those things. And when the negative stuff comes up, we have to take care of that. But again, if we come from those towards those negative aspects of the things we have to deal with from a good foundation of support and a good relationship, then it's going to be a lot easier, and our kids are going to be a lot more receptive. Doing that with adolescents, doing that with teenagers is difficult because, as Lauren said, naturally they're going to be, it's normal and natural for them to kind of start pushing away from that family structure, looking more towards their peers. We want them to do that. It's difficult to see, especially as a parent. It's difficult to feel our babies turning away from us and heading towards that peer group, but that's normal. We want them to go through that stage of development. And if we have some common interests and things that we can bond with, that's going to make those negative times a little bit more palatable for them and easier for us.
I think at a really basic level, Eileen, you said what are some very simple things that parents can do to help support kind of your kids' emotional well-being. We need to focus on kind of their entire physical well-being. Yeah. I'm seeing kids coming in, to our community mental health center all the time on 4 and 5 hours of sleep, drinking a huge Monster, and eating Takis for breakfast, right? And so I think nobody's going to feel good if those are the habits that we're establishing at home, right? Kids need to be getting more sleep. They need to be putting foods in their body that are healthy. They need to be getting out and exercising. If they're behind a screen for the available hours of their day outside of school, we're going to naturally see their mental health decline because physically they're not healthy either. And so I think as a parent, one thing sometimes we lose focus on because we're tired. We're all tired and stressed. I do it too with my kids. I'm like, just, eat the Doritos or whatever. But, I think we do need to lean more towards trying to establish some of those healthier habits. And it's actually a term called behavioral activation. If you will do those things, if you'll sleep, if you'll be physically active, if you're eating well, naturally you will have lower rates of depression. You're going to have the chemistry of your brain will be healthier.
And I like, Lauren, what you said about that chemistry of the brain. Sometimes we need to give our kiddos reasons to do what we're asking them to do, especially that sleep aspect. Physiologically, it's during that resting time when we're asleep that our brain is able to rejuvenate and reassimilate all those neurochemicals that our brain and body needs to feel good. So giving them some reasons why they need more rest. Nobody can survive, very few people can survive on 5 hours a night. It just is not going to happen in a good, healthy way. 7, 8, 9 hours a day is really what we are looking for when we're looking at rest. And nutrition, like Lauren said, is hugely important also.
And they go to school tired and they're falling asleep and then they're getting in trouble with their teachers. Their grades are poor. It's a ripple effect.
And I would just say, consider the changes that they're going through based on different stages that they're at. You know, if they're at middle school, they are still learning about going, for example, here, going into a bigger setting maybe than what they're used to, change in friends, change in relationships. You know, they could be experiencing, you know, change at home, whether it's divorce. There's different traumas, obviously, that, you know, maybe we have had as adults that we bring and expose the children to. And so just being patient overall.
I'm wondering, how many of you have teenagers in your house right now? Yeah, okay. Because talking to Richard, I mean, listening to Richard talk, I had teenagers, but now they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
But you know, just listening to them talk makes me think about it's no joke. It's hard. You know what I mean? Because you know they need to sleep and turn their phone off, but developmentally, it's time for them to say, no, I'm going to do it. I'm my own person. I'm going to do what I want to do. And it's just such a dance. So anyway, if you're frustrated, it's, you know, that's part of parenting teens. It's difficult. It's a dance. So you got to up your skills. And that's why you're here. You came here to up your skills. Okay, so next question. You know, we've kind of talked about I guess, typical teen and what they're going through. And so now I'm thinking more about when a kid is in crisis, when as a parent you feel like, you know, we've tried a lot of stuff. I've done this, I've done that. We're having lots and lots of talks. We're having lots of conflict. I'm really, really worried about my kid. What do you guys believe that parents need to know? What do you want them to know if they feel that their child is really struggling and might need some additional mental health support more than can be done in the family?
Well, I think, you know, I talk to a lot of parents who their kiddos are in crisis or they've had, you know, concerns about depression or anxiety or anger, and even progressing to the child, you know, making some sort of statement about thinking about suicide or an attempt about suicide. I think these are really important things to talk to your kiddos about. You know, typically, sometimes parents will say, I never had any idea, but there are a lot of warning signs along the way that you can pick up on or talk to your kid about. So if you start seeing major changes in mood or changes in behavior, or change in their sleep, change in their appetite, those are all signs that they may be struggling with depression or anxiety. You know, if you start seeing unexplained, you know, kind of markings on their body, be asking them about that. We see a lot of children and adolescents who are starting to engage in cutting behavior or self-harming behavior. You know, I think people are oftentimes scared to talk to their kids about it because they're scared that they may not know about the subject or may put an idea in their head. They already know. Yeah, they already know about all of these things. It's all over social media. They know somebody who has either, you know, been thinking about suicide or who has self-harmed or who has attempted suicide. And so there's not very many kids who actually live under the rock. You know, they know about things. And so talk to them, you know, ask them if they've ever felt that way. If you do talk to your kiddo or you have seen signs that they're either wanting to hurt themselves, there are resources for us in our community. We'll talk more about those. I've got some cards for anybody who needs them. But there is help. You don't have to be alone in that scenario.
And I would add, if your kid has been down and then you see the drastic change where their mood shifts and they act like everything's great and there was never any problems, that's a red flag too. I think oftentimes parents think, oh, they're fine now. Any mood shift that is a drastic change from what you have been seeing should be concerning, and you should then ask questions. Around this self-harm, one of the things I think often happens is kids feel like they get punished for it. So if I get caught self-harming or I tell my parent I'm self-harming, I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to get grounded or I'm going to get my phone taken away. So then they're not going to tell you. You have to remember that's not a behavior they're doing to make you angry or upset. It's a mental health concern. So you wouldn't punish somebody if they had high cholesterol levels, don't punish this kid because they're coping in the only way that they know how to cope with the emotions they're having.
Yeah, I usually tell any kids who say my parents are going to be angry, it's not that they're angry, right? It's that as a parent, when you're feeling angry like that, you're scared to death, right? What does this mean? What does this mean if my kiddo is experiencing this or is feeling this way? Fathoming, even having to fathom the thought that maybe your child doesn't want to live anymore is it's such a terrifying concept that most parents just respond in anger. But what really is at the root of that is fear. And if you have some tools to better prepare you to, prep you to feel like your home is more safe and you know how to talk to your kid about it, it's going to make you feel more confident and respond better. One of the number one reasons I see of kids who are in crisis or who are, having some sort of suicidal event is a relationship breakup or fallout. And I think as adults, we think, well, there's plenty of fish in the sea. You have all this time. That's not really something to be that upset about. But remember, the developmental stage that teens are at, they're very egocentric, right? We said that earlier. It's like, today is the worst day of my life, right? And they're not going to be able to see past that. And we can all remember being there at one point. And so if there is a breakup of a relationship or some sort of stressor that you know about, be more vigilant during those times.
One thing I'd like to encourage parents about is just the stigma associated with mental health or getting help for mental health issues. If your child woke up tomorrow morning and came down for breakfast or for breakfast, and all of a sudden you notice this big huge rash on their neck, or they're coming home from school one time or walk in the door and they have a big gash on their head, we're going to take them to the doctor and get some help right away. We're not going to delay getting some help because we're just hoping and maybe even praying that will just go away. The same thing for mental health issues. The brain is just another organ of the body that can get dysfunctional sometimes, just like any other organ of the body. And sometimes we need to get some help for that organ of the body, for the brain. So reaching out and getting some help, I would just encourage you to do that as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the time span between the first symptom of a mental health issue and the time we get help is 10 years sometimes between those two events. That's unconscionable, that we just can't have that with our kids. So if you're suspecting some problems, you don't have to drag your kid and go talk to Lauren necessarily. Go in and talk to Lauren yourself and ask some questions. This is what I'm seeing. Grab a buddy, grab a friend. This is what I'm seeing with my child. Is this typical? Is this normal? If it's not, get some help. A really good place to start is Lauren or your pediatrician. Take your child, if they're struggling with some depression or you suspect some anxiety, take them to your pediatrician. You hopefully have a really good relationship with your doctor. They know your child. They know what's typical and what's not typical. So that's a really good first place to start getting some help. They will also have a list of referrals to give you if they feel like you need some help. So get some help, reach out. Help is out there available.
And I just can't stress enough that culturally we need to normalize asking for help. I know personally in the Hispanic community, there's a machista, mentality where, you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to have emotions or show emotions, especially more so for the males. But you have to put yourself in the position of, would you rather them cry and get them help or not see them? I mean, you really have to make them important enough to get them help immediately. Because usually if they're asking, it's been going on for a while. It's not something that's new.
And I would add to that, I would also encourage parents that if you do get help and maybe that provider isn't a good fit, don't give up. all counselors are different. We're all counselors, but we all have our own personality. We have our own techniques. We have our own way of going about things, and we may not be a fit for everybody, and that's okay. So it's like if you take 5 pair of blue jeans into a dressing room, they can all be the same size, and they're going to all fit different. And it's so frustrating, but you got to keep trying them on because you can't just be like, oh yeah, they're all going to fit because they're the same size. It's the same way with counselors. So if it doesn't work with the first one, keep trying. And it's okay to tell that counselor, this isn't a good fit. Like, we're not going to get our feelings hurt. Like, we can handle it. So just say, hey, I want to get my child help, and I think they would do better with a female or a male, or they would do better with a Hispanic counselor or a Black counselor, or whatever you feel your child would be the most comfortable with. Ask for that, because we want to try to accommodate those things if we can, but we don't know what your child needs more than you do.
I know we talked about, when we talk about getting help, Lauren, I know you were talking about the variety of kinds of help there is. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like Tiffany was saying, sometimes I'll see people a lot that are like, we've tried everything and nothing has helped, right? And so it's, and it is that trial and error process. So just in our community, we do have, we have services if you have, there's all walks of life, and some of us have funding or finances to be able to pay for treatment. Other people don't have insurance or don't have the finances. But the good news is that in our community we have a variety of resources that you can access regardless of those facts. Okay, so as far as the local mental health authority is concerned, so at Texoma Community Center we offer mental health treatment for children, adolescents, adults. And you can, regardless of the ability to pay, you can come in and we can provide your child with psychiatric services, so medications if you feel like that would be helpful. We do what's called case management services, where we provide people with linkage to resources. We also have what's called our skills training program, where we're working with kids on the things that they're struggling with and teaching them applicable skills to be able to kind of change those aspects or strengthen their already established strengths, right? So sometimes it's not necessarily about just addressing the problem, it's about actually fostering or building a strength. And then we also have counseling services. So we have a variety of different services. We also have our crisis services in-house. So if your kiddo is experiencing a mental health crisis, we can help you navigate that. So is it that we need to be putting some things in the home to be safer, or is it that we need to potentially be looking at a hospital placement for your child to make sure that they're safe? So typically, if you can, call us. If we don't do it, if we don't provide that service that you're looking for, we can provide you somewhere else in the community that does it. We also have Child and Family Guidance, who Tiffany works for, who's a fantastic resource for counseling services in our community. So there are a lot of places that you can go to get help. So don't get discouraged if you've called somewhere and they're either not taking new patients or they've got a wait list. The reality is, the struggle in every community is that sometimes the need is more than the available services. And so sometimes that's a reality that we're all working to fix, right? But I think the reality is that sometimes we need to see the need in our community so that people can provide us with the right assistance and support, even from the state level. So if we act like we've got everything under control, then the funding sometimes doesn't catch up for us to be able to provide those resources. So don't give up on asking for help just because something hasn't worked in the past. I have seen kids come through the door where I think that kid is never going to talk. They're never going to talk to anybody. And lo and behold, we'll place them with just that right person, and 2 months later, they're a different kid, coming through the door. And so, don't give up hope. We also have groups in the evening. So we have a parent support group on Monday nights. We host young child and young kid and teen group. So we do get a group of peers together and we walk them through helpful topics that a lot of them are experiencing. So those are also services that they can receive.
So I've got one more question, but I want to say, you guys are giving really good advice because they really are. They're giving you good advice because I can tell you from my perspective, I've been in the mental health field and was a mental health counselor with Sherman ISD, but I also had a private practice before. And all the things you're saying are exactly what happens. It's like working on that little perfect storm helps, like working on the relationship when you just spend time with the kid and get involved in what they like and having patience and knowing they're going through a hard time. And then, advocating and really working hard to get them some extra help. And then sometimes it's just a perfect storm. You put all those little pieces together. Okay, we're going to have a plan where we're all going to go to bed a little earlier. We're going to put our phones in the kitchen. Sometimes it's just like, if you take a little bit of each thing they said, it's amazing. Kids get better. They really do. Like, so that's one thing I would encourage everybody to know is that it's like what Lauren just said. Keep advocating, keep trying to get help for your kid and keep trying at home. And they somehow they grow and they heal. So
Well, it's a little like a marathon. Mental health treatment isn't an overnight fix. It's not something that's going to get better because you got a prescription and you start it tomorrow. Like anything you do with mental health treatment is going to take time, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. And I think oftentimes, at least in our practice, what we see is parents are exhausted and they're tired and they're overwhelmed and they're stressed out, and then they take their kid to counseling and the behaviors get worse and they're like, forget it. Like, I'd rather have the kid I had before we started this. But you've got to hang with it because it's not a sprint. It does take time. I mean, and when I say it takes time, it can be months before you see a change. You might start to see little changes along the way, but before you like go, oh wow, okay, wait, this is the kid that I remember having before this happened. So don't give up, as exhausting as it is. And I would also encourage parents, when it gets to that point, please seek help for yourself. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we're all parents. I'm making that assumption. We're all parents. It's exhausting. Like, I'm a counselor and I'm exhausted as a parent, and I know what to do, and I still don't always do it. And so I would strongly recommend that parents get their own counselor. One, because then the teenager isn't like, oh, well, I'm the problem and they're just trying to fix me. Then it's like, okay, we're all in this together and we're all getting help. But also because parents need support. Mm-hmm. Like, it's exhausting. Like, just living is exhausting, then tack on raising a teenager.
And then a teenager.
I haven't gotten to the teenager phase yet, so
just wait. We'll okay. So the last question I wanted to ask is, how do you know, Lauren touched on suicidal ideation and behaviors, and that's another topic that I know, if you pay any attention to the news and social media, that mental health issues are rising, and suicide attempts, suicides, that is going up in our country. So I want to address that. So how do you know if you have a mental health emergency, and what should you do?
So like I said earlier, if your child has ever made a statement about, that they're contemplating suicide, or you've ever seen behavior, or they've made any sort of attempt, you can absolutely reach out to crisis services. We're available 24/7, 365. We can provide a crisis assessment and give you direction on exactly kind of what level of care is really warranted at that point, meaning, are they safe to stay in your home, or do we need to do something that's a little more intense at this time to keep the child safe? One thing I would say and stress to every parent, I feel really strongly about this, is that if your child, that they struggle with depression, or that they struggle with anxiety, or they've gone through a tough time, they've got trauma, and they've made any sort of statement about suicide, you need to go through your home and make your home safer for them to live in. So some of the most dangerous things they can have access to are just over-the-counter medications. They're more likely to have a lethal overdose off of an over-the-counter medication than even a prescription medication, okay? So make your home safer. They shouldn't have access to a bottle of Tylenol, okay? That's a really dangerous thing for them to have access to. So lock up your medications. If they need medications for something, a headache, that they may need to ask. You know, guns in the home. The idea behind what we call like lethal means restriction, right, is that you want to put time and space in between the thought that comes in their head and the bad decision being possible, okay? And so the more time and space you can put between the thought, I want to kill myself, and having access to a bottle of pills, if that makes sense. So, you know, guns or really big knives or over-the-counter medications, things that are obviously dangerous. You know, the world is full of dangerous objects, and you're never going to be able to do, you know, you're never going to be able to eradicate all danger. You know, your kid is not going to live in a bubble. But we can do some things to prevent or lower the likelihood that if they decided to do something to hurt themselves, it wouldn't be as damaging.
Anybody want to add anything to that?
I'll just add that sometimes mental health looks different in kids and teenagers than it does adults. So it may look like anger outbursts, temper tantrums, sleep disturbances, eating disturbances. It's not always, oh, depression is sad or anxiety is nervous. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it just looks different. So again, it goes back to, you know your kid. If they act different, ask, because something could be going on.
And I would just encourage you to just, if you see something concerning, just seek help. Don't sit back and wait and hope that it gets better. Especially if we see some sort of non-suicidal self-injury like the cutting or things like that. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid to talk to your kids about it. And then be very proactive. If you feel like they're needing some help, reach out and get some help as soon as possible. Because the sooner that we can get some help for your student, for your kiddo, the more effective that help is going to be.
Share that, you know, just have access to their social media. Be aware of what's going on, what's being said, because a lot of times they will share some of those thoughts where they are wanting to self-injure or expressing suicidal ideation, and their friends are the ones that are catching it. They're the ones that are reporting it at the schools. Make the parent portal that's available to you, use it. Be aware of their grades, be aware of their attendance, because a lot of times parents don't have a clue that they're coming in at 9:30 every day, or that they're not going to class, or they're leaving early. There's things that are going on, and we don't know until the last minute. And sometimes, you know, even, you know, here we can, even if we are aware that they're absent, there could be people calling for them and saying that they're sick, and you may not know it. We may not know that it's somebody else. So just be aware of, you know, use that parent portal and look into it and keep up with it weekly so that you have an idea of what's going on campus.
So, so the message is, don't wait. Get them help if you're having a suicide emergency. I mean, a mental health emergency, suicidal ideation. Specifically, can you tell people how do they get help? Like, they're at home, you know, their kid is expressing thoughts of suicide, is very upset. What do they do?
I would encourage, the first thing to do is not to freak out, at least outwardly. You can freak out inside all you want to, but outwardly, just that care and concern that you have, that we all have for our kids. And there is going to be those freak out type of feelings that we have internally. But there's help out there. And that's the thing we need to kind of focus on. Not that my child is suicidal, as much as what help is he or she needing right now. And then start, make some steps to get that help pretty quickly.
And I would say the steps are, you can call the
Yeah.
crisis lines.
Yes.
They're
Get them.
available 24/7. They have a phone number for that. You can call 911 if, in that moment, sometimes we're not always thinking clearly ourselves because we're worried about our kid. You can call 911 and they'll get you to the crisis mobile unit. You can go to the nearest ER and TCC will respond to that as well. So, I mean, again, it's sometimes we just have to, like he said, stay calm, but that's sometimes easier said than done. So what you would do is kind of what you would do in any emergency, is you fall back on the things you already know, which is, okay, I've got to get my kid somewhere to a medical provider for them to do something. And so if you can't remember the crisis line, you can go to the hospital, you can call 911, and they'll get you there.
It's very similar if, again, if our son and daughter walked into the house and they have a big gash on their head and it's bleeding profusely. We're not going to wait around to see, maybe, hopefully, that head is going to stop bleeding on its own. We're going to get some help pretty quick. It's just, which number do we dial? Okay, we dial the medical number for a medical emergency and a mental health number for a mental health emergency. And that's what it's all about. And we can explain that to our kids. This is not a huge, major deal. It's just a deal that we need to be proactively managing, not running away from or anything like that. We just need to manage it, and how we manage it is that number that we call is the main difference.
Yeah, and so our crisis line for the video is 877-277-2226. I've got cards for people who are here. But our crisis team is trained to deal with these things, okay? We know we deal with these scenarios every day. We know that it's scary for parents. The last thing, I do our licensed consults, so they have to speak with me or another licensed clinician to talk through the scenario with us and come up with kind of a decision about what we're going to do. Our last goal is to put a kiddo in the hospital, okay? We want to do what we can to enable and empower parents and teens to feel safe in their homes, right? Because there's no magical fairy dust that the hospital has. While sometimes it's necessary, they still are going to have to come home, back to their lives, back to their school, back to their homes. So we need to make those places safe for our kids. And so don't feel worried about calling like they're automatically going to go to the hospital or something like that. We're going to work with you to determine the best situation for your family and what's going to be the safest option.
Thank you. So I want to open it up and see if you guys have any questions that you want to ask.
So how do you deal with teenagers like body imaging? Because like body shaming is a really big thing. I have a daughter. She's a teenager, so it's just like it's really hard, and I try social media and little girls, how they can be. So how can I help her with that? Because I was on the opposite end. I was loyal. I didn't get curves and all that stuff. Became a mother. So it's like really hard because she's there already. It's like, what do I say?
Yeah, we see a lot of body image issues, at Texoma Community Center. We also we're really lucky to have a local specialist who specializes in that, Dr. Waite. She has Texoma Specialty Counseling, and they specifically really focus on body image and disordered eating behavior. It is very concerning. More people die of disordered eating behavior than any other mental illness. And so it is very concerning, and something that I'm glad that you've noticed and that you've been working with her on. I think a lot of kiddos have just these images of what they think beautiful looks like and means, and we really have to work on redefining those things and establishing healthy physical habits for them. So,
And it's very common too.
yes.
It's not unusual. There's a good percentage of kiddos out there that are suffering with those same thoughts. So just talking to your daughter about, this is just something that people struggle with, and how are we going to struggle with this together? And do we need to get some help? I don't know. Maybe asking her, do you feel like you need to get some help at this point in time? I don't know. Getting her perspective on it, and then sitting down and deciding together what to do, come up with a plan on what to do.
I think something else parents can do that we don't always think about is consider how we talk about our own bodies in front of our children. So if as a parent we're always talking about, oh, I need to lose weight, or I look fat in that, our kids are listening. And so they're gonna pick up on that talk. And so I would encourage you to use positive self-talk about your own body and your own self-image, and then use that with her as well. So then you're modeling the behaviors for her that you're wanting to see.
I'll preface this with, I hate social media.
Yay.
But it's also such a balance right now where kids are getting, like I have a 14-year-old, and he gets all this information through whether it's one of Snapchat, Instagram, whatever. I'm torn to the point where you want to allow them to have that social interaction because, oh, we're missing out on a friend's party, or hey, we're going down to the pool to swim, and he misses it, versus I would want to delete the whole thing because I obviously the worst case scenario is it exceeds into you're stupid and you're fat and I hate you, and then they start the self-esteem stuff stars and all that, and it's a cyberbullying type of thing. So what's the balance to keep kids engaged, because that's how they're communicating these days in a good sense, but not make it ridiculous. I mean, he's 14, and like you said, find your way. Okay, you get an hour a day. Well, no, Dad, that's stupid. I'm having a good conversation right now. Well, you know what I mean? I don't know. Take it on. Man.
Well, okay, whoever can answer that is gonna like
Yeah.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's hard, yeah.
It is.
It is the question.
Yeah,
Because
hope-
if you go too far this way, you know, then you've shut them down. But if you go too far this way, then they have the whole world of scary stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully you're going to get 4 opinions up here, 4 different opinions, and then you can make up your own mind. My opinion would be is to sit down and talk to your son about it and say, and maybe negotiate with him a little bit on this issue, because as you said, that social media is important to them, so we don't want to pull that completely away from them. And that's a good way for them to start experimenting with some of their freedoms a little bit. But they shouldn't be living on that. That shouldn't be their only source of talking, which is not really talking, but so kind of negotiate maybe with them a little bit. Look at his levels of responsibilities and how he's doing with those other responsibilities right now in his life. How's he doing, you know, keeping his chores up and his grades up, and is he being responsible with other aspects of his life? And let him know, hey, just like when he grows up and gets a job, if he wants more responsibilities in his job, he needs to take care of his current responsibilities. Same type of thing. If he wants some more time working on social media, how are the other parts of his life coming along? Is he being responsible with those type of things? And then monitoring it. You know, my kids, I knew their passwords. I checked on those. You know, those devices that they have were my devices. I paid for them, so I owned them. I allowed them to use them at my discretion, and I let them know that it is my phone. It maybe has an aspect of your privacy on there, but it is still my phone, and we need to keep it as respectful and responsible with those items as we can.
I mean, you're not going to get 3 or 4 different opinions because I agree, so maybe 3 at this point. But I do agree with him, and I would add that I think it does come back to the relationship again, that if you notice being on social media is impacting his mood, his behaviors, it's okay to say, hey, I noticed that when you watch TikTok videos of that person, you start doing this. Like, can we talk about that? And maybe being open to a dialogue and a discussion about it instead of an immediate, like, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Because I think the minute you start the no, you're not allowed to, is the minute you're going to get the pushback and the arguing and the, you know, you don't even know what it's like to be a teenager these days, you know, whatever teenagers are saying now. I can't keep up. So I think if you have that, build that relationship with your kid and you're able to have that open dialogue with them, when stuff comes up with social media, you can talk to them about it. And I do think it's a great idea to allow them the responsibility of social media, but with like a safety net underneath that, like, hey, there's a big world out there that social media opens you up to. And so because of that, there's a learning curve to it. Let's work on that. And it builds trust between me and you. And so that's how this is going to work.
Yeah, I recently, you know, I think at times I've thought about screens as being a privilege, right? Like you get a certain amount of time on a screen and it's a privilege, right? And somebody actually recently reframed it to me as being an actual responsibility. So how responsible is your child in that they can determine what is false or what is true or what is safe or what is not? And I think using those guideposts as being how much social media is my child even ready for? And I think that they model from us as well. So if we are constantly in our TikTok or using filters or whatever we're doing, and then we expect them not to do those same behaviors, they're going to see that as the kind of hypocrisy that is. And so if our entire life is built around our social media, we can't expect our children to be doing something different. So I think establishing more family time, like Tiffany said, talking through those. Well, what do you see on TikTok? What kind of videos do you watch? What leads you to like those, you know, and kind of trying to understand more.
And just to kind of go off the social media responsibility, as teenagers, just remind them about their thumbprint. Everything that they post, once it's out there, it can't be taken back. All the social media, you know, has a lot to do with students losing scholarships and opportunities out there, and they don't realize it until it's too late. And it's gotten to the point where a lot of colleges, when it comes to choosing individuals that are going to come to their campus, that's what they're looking at. They're starting to go through their social media, because if they have to weed them out, that's going to be the easiest way to really figure out who a person is, by what they post, by what they say, because face to face they can be a completely different person than what they're posting.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's so complicated and hard. I looked on my phone because when you were talking about it, there was a book I used to always recommend to parents that I wanted to tell you all about, called Positive, I have to remember the name of it, Positive Discipline for Teenagers, and it's Jane Nelson, and it goes with the theme y'all are talking about. I found it really useful for the kind of these situations where it's like, if you go too far this way, where it's like you don't have a phone and you don't have social media, you end up in one thing, but if you let it go, anyway, it helps to negotiate the middle, because that's really what you have to do with teenagers. But it's called Positive Discipline for Teenagers, Empowering Your Teens and Yourself Through Kind and Firm Parenting. So it's Jane Nelson. And I used to recommend this to parents, and parents liked it. And then I have two boys. One was easy, one was hard. Okay, so my hard boy, I would learn things in this book, and I would use it, and it was like, oh my gosh, that worked. You know, little phrases, like he would have some problem, I'd say, wow, that sounds rough. What do you think what's your plan? And that was something I learned from the book. It worked great, because then I wasn't fixing his problem. So anyway, it's a good book. Your question made me think of it. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just say there's materials back there for the parents that have to do with how you have a conversation with your children, what's a good thing to say, what's maybe not such a helpful thing to say, and then some information about signs of mental distress and depression, and then how you can respond to that. So just materials back there that they don't look at.
Thank you. And this is Amy Poole. She works with Grant Halliburton Foundation, and we partner with them, the school district. Grant Halliburton Foundation helps promote mental health, get mental health services. They do programs in the schools. It's a suicide prevention agency. Did I say it right?
Yeah, good.
a mental health provider and you don't know where to go, we have a searchable database and you can go in and just answer a few questions and we'll generate a list of providers that might meet your criteria. But if you don't even know where to start, you can always call our navigation service and we have navigators who will talk you through all of that and help you find the services you're looking for.
And what's your website, Amy?
HereForTexas.com.
.com.
And I bet y'all have noticed, so Lorena Tidwell, she was a school, she's not working in Sherman High ISD anymore. They moved, but she's a school counselor, and this week is School Counselors Week, and just listening to her, your school counselors are a resource too. They really, a lot of times people think, oh, they help with the schedule or scholarship letters, but really they know a lot about teenagers and they know a lot about mental health and just that what you just said about, oh, what you put on social media could affect your future. Like that's a good reminder. So that's a resource that we have in the schools is your school counselors. So any other questions? And we'll wind it up. Oh, it's 7 o'clock. Perfect. Okay.
Exciting.
And so if you guys want, so there's things at the back. If you have questions that you'd just like to ask, one-on-one, we've got one of Mary Ann Hill and Amy Milner. They're both counselors at Sherman High School, and they're here too. So there's lots of people. We'd all be happy to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you for coming.